my chat window disappeared, but these are like, I use slides.com, so I put the link up to the slides because there's links so people can refer to it and use it. And like, if you want to give it on your own, like that's cool with me. But yeah, so this one is just API testing. This could be, with these talks, this could be PHP, it could be Ruby, it could be Rails, it could be Node.js. I just say Node.js, those are the server-side things I run. We won't cover much server-side code at all, but like I've got a few demos that are running on my computer. That's what I did them in. But this could apply to anything, PHP, Rails, whatever, just any API. And this is me, Lee Blazik, Berserk Interactive. We did all that. And then today, so here's like the overview of what I was going to go over. And so what is Postman? What is Newman? Running Newman in CI/CD, and running Newman as a monitor, meaning that you can write these tests in Postman, and that's where most people stop. They just put a URL in like a post and check it comes back manually. But it can do so much more, and that's where Newman comes in, is the command line. So you can export your Postman files and put them on an EC2 server and run them and post them back to Slack, or have them run in Jenkins or Circle CI. And then Postman also, oh, I should edit that. There's an S there. That S shouldn't be there. Postman also, if you want, like most people like to keep their API tests internal, but Postman actually has a huge online feature that, say you make a public API, like COVID APIs are like a huge rage now, and they could publish those docs into Postman and make them publicly accessible as an option. So we can overview that. And the way I've made this is, I won't go into super detail, but I'll show everyone to get it running. Because as developers, like this stuff's relatively easy. It's just knowing what it can do. It might not be obvious. Those are like the overviews. So to compare two things, I like to talk about both the same. So Postman is the API client or the GUI. There's other ones like Insomnia, and I'm sure if Daniel was just at Turing School, the Turing School and Galvanize, they're always using the latest and greatest. There's usually 5 things that can do this, but Insomnia is one I can remember. There was like API Cat, or Pause was another Mac one. But yeah, so the GUI, so you can send REST, SOAP, GraphQL requests in Postman, and you use it to write calls. Collection is a group. You can write tests for these calls, and there's also environment files. Like for example, if you're writing code locally, your URL is localhost, but your API is /API/v1 whatever, login. But when you deploy it, it's something.com. So the URL is the same, but the environment files are how you can, you can change the URL variable. That's, a lot of people know that, not all. And I just have these links. You guys can probably all find this, but here's the Postman homepage. You can download, start it. And then Newman, they should make it way more obvious. Like in their homepage, they should have Newman, because you have to dig to find Newman. It's not obvious. But Newman, it's the CLI command line. It's written in Node.js. And the one huge difference is that you can't write tests or collections or anything in Newman itself. You have to write them in Postman and then actually export it. That's the key missing thing. But then here, we can open this, just so you see the page. They have really good documentation, right? Getting started, installing it, the options, and I won't go off of it, but they have good help, and that's why I put the link in my slideshow. So you want to do more, I'm sure you can all figure out, you're all experienced people, or a Turing School graduate. Turing is a good school. So that's what that. Yeah.
Where did you put a link to the slides?
In the chat for this.
In the chat. Okay.
Yeah, and I usually send out an app if I can do it correctly. So I did, at least in my last talk, Sylvia, I put all the links in an email afterwards, but obviously I messed that up getting this one out. But I send all these out. Yeah, I did put this in the chat for this link right now. Oh yeah, I see someone's chatting.
Yeah, let me
Yeah,
find
it was me.
Great.
So I don't see the URL. Sorry.
They're not.
My mistake, maybe. I don't know.
Maybe since I did them earlier, it doesn't all. Maybe you don't see the old ones. I'll put it in there again right now if you want to follow along. So here we go. Did that come through?
Yeah, we're good.
Great. Yeah, I just try and make all the stuff free knowledge and stuff. Great, so that's the overview of how the things work together. And then more detail, Postman, network calls, and you can write pre-request scripts. Has anyone done any of those? So that's where, say for example, you want to, like, if you're testing your APIs, like sometimes you want to do a post, right? And you need to enter some, like a good thing is just a timestamp. What a pre-request script does is it says, hey, you know, just do, they're all written in Java. You can say like, hey, make this variable just equal to new date and time. And then that uses it in the Postman's environment file. And then when you do your post, you have a variable and you put that in the post body so that you're not pumping just like name one like 20 times when you're doing your test. You can have, if anyone's used Faker is another library that you like fake names, you can inject that. And this is stuff I will run through. Like I'm gonna open up Postman and do all this stuff. So that's what the pre-request scripts do. Or they can even, for example, if you've run a, like login's a good example. Like obviously you need to get an ID token. You can run a test and make sure you have a valid token in your environment file. Then there's tests themselves, which not everyone knows that they're, and making the API call, everyone knows that one. But you can also, say you run a login, then you say, well, hey, in my environment file, I need to have this login token in my header for all these other 20 calls to run my test because you have your API protection. So that's how to set those. And using authentication, there's a couple ways. So that's the overview of what we're doing in Postman. And then for Newman, that's command line runner. Again, you run everything you made in the GUI. And basically, since it's in the terminal, by default, it just prints out the thing in the terminal. You can turn that on or off. But also, it returns 0 or 1. So that means like in your Jenkins or Circle CI or Travis, you know, if you have a task and you run it 0, like 0's pass and 1's fail, I think. I always forget. We can look it up, but it's just your true or false whether it fails. And then you can also generate tons of different reports. This, you know, the simplest is it just prints it out to the terminal. But in fancier CIs like Jenkins or Circle, which I've used a lot, you know, you have your runs and you can save your report. So maybe you have like 200 APIs. You can save your report to go back and look and get more. If you have really good error reporting, then you can actually see your error reporting, the timing of these things, and I'll show that. But you can do text, JSON, HTML, Markdown, JUnit. Like if in Circle loves a lot of tests run on JUnit. If you just do your report in JUnit, it imports it and makes it all nice and fancy and stuff. And then also, if you use Jenkins in that well, you can say, hey, Jenkins, save this HTML report, and then you can have a hook run when the tests are over, and you can send has anyone used Slack integrations? You can send that to Slack, like say you have your API channel or your dev channel. You can say, well, maybe only post these if it fails, but it posts a link to your report or the actual report in your channel so you can see what went wrong. Because if you've ever worked on APIs, it can be a pain in, you're always digging through all these files and where's it's gone. And in theory, you can do the posting to Slacker or HipChat with any of these runners, but Slack's easy and very popular. So now we're gonna pull up the Postman itself.
All right, show us some good stuff here.
And can everyone read this, or do I need to zoom in the text?
A little zoom would be helpful.
Let's see. Let's zoom in. Yeah, I know this thing. I have a high. The nicer quality screen you have means it's harder to read.
Right.
Is this
It's readable.
good for everyone? Great. Well, so in the simplest, and you guys have probably already opened this, but just in case you haven't, this is like your main page, and on the left, you've got this sidebar which can be toggled. It's not always there. I think it's command. Yeah, it's command / to toggle it open, just like your sidebar in Atom or VS Code if you use those. But here, so collection is like a group of APIs. So I'll start out with this Postman Echo. because you can have your locals. This is a nice test collection, and they have documentation for it. One thing I'll go about later is that I've imported this to their documentation, and this has like every possible combination of things and headers and tests, which is a good example. And then we can do this GraphQL one, which is one I did for something running locally, or this refinery somewhere here is something I worked on, and it's also running locally. But this is a nice place. So in the simplest, or let me close this. Close, get out of there. Or sorry, I'll start even simpler. So here, let's make a new request. Let's just do, we're starting from complete scratch. Here, you choose your method. It's actually got a lot. These are, the top 5 are the ones we mostly use. Some of these, I don't even know what purge does. That's a new one. Has anyone used that one? But we can do just like HTTP, just Google. It's not an API, but just to see how it works. You just type in your URL, and then if you don't do anything, it just does a get, and it should actually give us the HTML for that page. Yeah, so here you can see it's literally just, here's our HTML. Obviously, this is not how you normally use this, but just starting from the super simple, because it can be a bit to weed through all this. Now, if you want to get more complicated, obviously, like you do a /API, whatever, and in these tabs, there's various ways to do the authorization. You can inherit things down in groups and all these things. Or in the simplest, you just have your header, and it's usually authorized. It even has predetermined things, and then you put in your token. Now, what pains me is the thing that's most handy is if even huge places like DaVita, everyone opens their, say you're working on an Angular app, they open it up, they log in, and then they log into their Angular, and then they copy it out of the console. That's a lot of work. And what we can do in Postman is you can, token, and this is actually an environment variable that I've actually written. Has anyone used environment files before? So Daniel has. Well, they're fairly simple, but for example, on a project I was working on, it was called Refinery, and what you do is you open this up, or sorry, there's a list of my options, but here's what I've actually defined the term token, and then I've run it a few times. I'll show how it all works, but that's the token. So by using these curly brackets in here, you can even hover it, and you can see what's in your environment file, right? So using these curly brackets. Now, alternatively, if you're doing something quick, you can just type in, whatever you want in these values. But that's where these environment files come in really handy to use. And again, maybe you have you can use any keys. Your application is, accept all your headers are very common. Ooh, and remind me, I just realized there wasn't something you can actually copy things from the terminal, the inspector in the browser, and then import them in here. Say you want to figure out a call, what's going wrong in your Node project. Remind me to do that later. But those are the headers, and if you're doing a post, here's where you put in your body. Say you want to you can do GraphQL bodies. You can just do raw. You can do form encoded with keys. You can do form data with a key, in a traditional not a view, but a PHP old page, where it just goes to a new page. And here's the pre-request script. This is where you might get something or set something. And they even have nice little snippets here. It makes it so easy. Say you're doing a login and you want to clear it. You can do, so PM is Postman, globals, unset that key. You can, those are global environment. Here's where you work in your environment file. This is the key and the value. So if I were to say set token here, and it even has it because I remember it, set token to variable value. It would go and change that in my environment file up here. It's pretty handy, and not many people get it. Sometimes you don't need to get into it, but and here's where you'd actually write a test. So say you want to like you want to check some of your JSON, you PM test. And if you've seen Mocha and some of these other testing frameworks or Chai, it's really similar. You know, your test name function, you PM response is what you get back, JSON data, and then PM expect is your actually, and this, you know, just like Mocha, it's PM expect your thing to dot equal 100 or has or contains, whatever. It kind of uses its own language, but it's usually based on Mocha. It does have predictive and really good examples. So now let's just go into this one. Let me close this. And Postman does run on, it's an Electron app, if you guys know that. So if you notice my computer's slowing down, I've got like a bunch of things open in other windows, and if you get a lot of Chrome open, it can slow things down.
I have a question.
Oh no, did I just close Postman? There we go. Sure, Sylvia.
The environment files are written in JSON too?
Correct.
Key value, all of that?
Well, I can show you that. They're quite you don't actually, even though they're JSON in the end, you actually use the GUI to write them. I would recommend not writing them. I can show you that next up. But yeah, the way you do it is here. Where would you do? This is your settings thing, and you can say, you can add a new one. So this is like new thing, and this is where you actually make it, and you can say, here's token, and you can say initial value, blah, blah, blah. And then here's another one, foo. This is where you make it, and then if you want to use it in your Newman, you export it. It adds a bunch of funky things, so I wouldn't, that's how you actually write it in here, and that's up in this settings thing up here on the right. This is like your list of them, and you can import, add. I can show you how to import and export stuff too. But like here's a more fancier thing. So we've got a get request, and you can see the params up here, and it's actually figured it out, the query params down in here for you. Doesn't have any, there's 8 hidden headers actually. You can see it's, these are fairly normal ones. You know, some of the things it hides. I don't think we have a body. There's no pre-request script, but they do have a test here. You can see PM test, response is okay, and it's just PM response to have status 200. Response body has JSON with request queries. You can say the body has these args, args.foo, bar, JSON body, blah, blah. So we can send this. And you see here's this is the JSON we get back, you know, args, foo1, here's the headers. And this Postman, this is going to Postman Echo. This is just like some test server they've set up. So this is just purely to play with. But what you can see is like, say I want to make it fail, I can change that and send it, and now we should get a test failure. Yeah, so see, our 200 pass is okay, and response body has a JSON with these queries, you know, expected args.foo to contain bar 3, but we got bar 2. So that's the short of the tests. And you can even see, even if you don't have to write tests at all, like you can just go in here and comment this out or not write them, and you can still run these calls. You know, it says, show me how to write tests. But you still see, here's like your status, here's the time it took, and the size. And one particular neat thing I like to do is, a lot of times, you know, tests can be very complicated because your data may change. And if you have a test server and a staging server and then your live server, you know, you shouldn't have like foo bar in your live server. But you can always check for your response time and make sure it's status okay. That's one easy thing you can always do. You know, especially if you're doing CI/CD, stuff could be deploying every 10 minutes or, you know, at least daily if you're doing it a lot. And it's just an easy check rather than manually checking. You can always check for status okay and 200. And that's the one thing they did up here. And you can always say like time less than like 2 seconds. you're checking. But those are some basic tests. And then here, this one's like a post. We can send this. And you can see here, there's no query params, but I'm sure here in the body, yeah, this is expected to be sent back as part of the response body. And here's our test, checking our status, and then expect JSON body.data to have this string. And here's that string, right? And I mean, if you guys are, this is fairly simple stuff, but most people don't know it there. And let's go maybe into more of a funkier one. Like here's the delete they've got. And you see they're using the delete method. That's expected. Again, comes back. Okay. What else do they got in here? You can set headers. We're going. Yeah. So here we're expecting response to have the header foo in bar 1. We can look at the headers. You see it's here. You're checking the headers. You can set all this stuff. I mean, usually this is stuff you set on your server for whatever reason, for your authentication, your OAuth, blah, blah, blah. Here's let's see what they've done for this one. I believe they're, at least I thought. But here's where they're checking. They're actually using this built-in shortcut for authentication. They're sending username and password. We can send this. And then their thing just sends back authenticated true, and obviously we're checking for that. Okay, so that everyone gets the general idea, right? There's tons of things in here, but you guys get the basic idea, right? We could go into all the details. But here, there's some other interesting you can test streams, delays. Another thing I don't think they have in this main demo is GraphQL. So here's has everyone here used GraphQL at all? Or Daniel maybe, and anyone else? So it's it came from Facebook. Their theory on all this, whether better or not, but it's definitely getting popular, is instead of having like different API endpoints, like login and then, oh, you have a question, Tom?
I am somewhat familiar with it. As a matter of fact, there's a nice article about why GitHub switched over to using GraphQL for their latest API.
Yeah,
So, go ahead.
Okay, we all know the basics then, but it's always one endpoint. It's your slash GraphQL. So this, at least a half an hour ago, I had this server up and running. So for a GraphQL request, which is nice, you can just string out and do like your query or your post body to do a GraphQL request like the browser does it. But you can literally write your query right here. This is your GraphQL query in your variables, and you can send it, and you can write your GraphQL right in there. And if you have a really good schema, for this other project, I had a schema set up. If you have a well-defined schema, you can import it, and you can get your, it's predictive, like query, and then would be like, you can see get admin customer. It's predicting all your GraphQL. And I only learned this, I've been using Postman for like 7 years, but I only learned that this year, and maybe it just came out. So it's very handy, because you can use that. You can get the localhost 4000 GraphQL GUI thing in the browser, and it's handy. But this is even more handy. You can save a browser window to test and do it. So I think that's pretty cool. And here's one for this test thing. If we get you can even use your GraphQL variables. Like there's ID 60 and that replaces it over here, and launch ID, rocket type. Boom. So yeah, if this is, I'm sure you guys can see it, but just to know it's there, that's one thing. It's like, it's not that obvious. And even a year ago, I don't think this GraphQL button was there. So that's what I think is pretty cool. especially this is my first year working with GraphQL. And then here, I'll show you, so these, let me close these so I don't blow up my computer.
So now I'm going to have to get out some GraphQL and Postman and play around.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. But here's like, so here's something I've actually written and worked on with some environment files. So you can see here, I don't have like www or HTTP. I have the curly brackets URL. So where, and you can see it's interpreted, it's localhost 2000. And where it's getting that is from this URL and this environment file. That's where it's coming from. I think I have a, I don't have any, but I don't have any of the deploy, because we had a whole separate account. Postman, you can also log in actually, and this is my personal one. We were using all these online features, which I'll go into. So I actually used my company's email to do that. And some of that was in that one once we started using the staging URLs. But you get the idea, right? You can have one, this is local, so here's localhost, but then if you have your deployed, you could make a new environment file. You'd go in here and you can say, hey, take refinery local. See, here's the duplicate button. And here's refinery local copy. And here I'll go in, I'll just say like staging, right? And then in here you'd do like staging.com, right? You guys get the idea. You swap the URL, and then so your tests can always be the same, but you can switch and apply them to, and you can even have different data. You can have like test data associated with them, huge amounts and things. So it's pretty handy for doing continuous integration. But here's like a login. So we do a body, and this actually was a Graph API QL, but with the security, for whatever reason, we couldn't use the writing GraphQL. And I never got to that way. But here's some tests I have. We want 201. I want the response time less than 200 milliseconds. PM response time 2B below 200. And I want to set the token so I can use it. This is my first one, and I want to run these other ones. So I do JSON data equals response, get the thing. And I set it as an environment variable and access. So we send this. In fact, if we look, here's the token, here's the current value of this ZGF20 at the end. If we do this, this should change that. So here we go. Yeah, here's this. It's KUMD, and what I had a test failure. Yeah, so here's my test. So it works, but my response time was 506 seconds, but it did set the token. So if we look up at our token up here, you can see that token change in the environment file. So that's the basic, but now we can go in here into me, and I can send this, and here's, like after a login, some data. And here in this, we have some more extensive tests. And one thing I've done, you can test for exact values of data, but if your API is working, in theory, you can just check any user or any API. And what I've done is just check the keys to make sure the keys exist. Like, here's all the keys. Like, who cares if it's full or not? Like, this is like a smoke test version, but this test can be transported to any environment. So it doesn't actually matter the value of the data, but it makes sure you have all your keys, and it's not a 500 or it's not a 400. So it's very transportable. And what I do is check the status, check the time, and then I check to make sure it just has the correct keys here. So I just say array for each key in this array, make sure that each key is actually there, and expect the length to be 9. So that's a nice like smoke test version. And then here's another one where we send, this should work. This code's a bit older. Okay, yeah. So something's going wrong with this older server. But you get the idea. So that's the individual test. Now to run, this is still just, that's just one call at a time. Now we have all these grouped in a collection. To run a collection in the GUI, you hit this little arrow, and now you can run the whole thing and opens a new window. And this is how, like, say, especially if you're working on projects and you're pulling code and other people are working on it all the time, like half the time if I get code from someone else. I want to run the test to make sure at least what I'm starting on isn't messed up or working, or at least that the tests are right. So here's how you can run all these at once. And so you can pick your environment file, and now you can run. And yeah, maybe my local thing of this shut down or something. It's 4 months old code and maybe out of date. But you get the idea. So I've run, and I've run a whole bunch of tests right after another, seeing what's failed instead of having to just one at a time and then get a token from the browser and log in and be really annoying. There's summaries. And then here, there's this run in command line. This usually takes you to the Newman docs that run in command line. And that's, funnily enough, Newman isn't shown anywhere in here. You'd think they would have that more obvious. But here's like the NPM for Newman, which I'll get to in a sec. Great, so that's the overview of all of this, I think. You can see your history here of what you've been doing. APIs is like a super group of collections, and more, it's, if you want to do a lot more, maybe Google would use it, but it's just a group of collections. You can define, like here's the schema for that GraphQL thing, tests. You can also mock servers, which you haven't done very much, tests, observe. You can do monitoring and have them run from Postman. Let's see. So now let's say, actually I'm gonna show you another funky thing. Let's say you wanna check an API call, like there's some new thing you need to fix, and you wanna get a call from some new project, or maybe, I don't know, whatever, but I'll show you a clever way that it's not that obvious, to take a call right out of here and test it. Like, so where's issues is a good one. That's an API. So here, here's everyone knows the network tab where I'm in here in the browser, right? I open the inspector and do network. I can right click on here, and then you can do copy, and you can copy as a Node.js fetch, as a curl, as all these things. So I'm going to copy this as a curl request. That's the command line, and then I'm going to import it. And what you can literally do is paste raw text, because that's what that copy is. Here's where you would curl this in the command line. You can import it, and then what it parses it, and it gives you all your headers and all your tokens or things for the API you're checking. So it can be a really handy way, or especially if you don't have Postman set up. This realistically, having 18 headers or whatever, for me, that's fairly normal. I'm working on these APIs that you've written, and it can be a pain to just go in and pick them out. So this is a cheap and easy way to get it, and we can send this. We'll probably get an error because I don't think we have a token, or do we? It's not giving us any time. This is not modified. Okay, but you get the idea. That's a nice trick not many people know about to get stuff in here easy. Now so getting into Newman. So Newman, everyone knows how to install things with Node.js, like npm install -g, right? So Newman, the command line client is a Node client. So you need to have Node running, like Node, probably version 10 and up, running on your system. Like you want to check for Node -v. If you don't have that, you just go to Node and install it all. But then you'd also do like npm install, I is short for install -g, Newman to install the client, and that is listed here. Like this would go through using the Newman CLI. Like here's how to install Newman with brew. I guess you can do that if you don't have Node. But if you have Node installed anyways, you can npm install. But here's, just because everything usually goes wrong when you're doing it live, I had this all set up, and then I'll show you how to export and do it. But I already exported that Postman Echo collection, and you can see simply it's Newman run. Here's the name of the file. Postman, the slash is there's just a space in the name. And -r is for if you want to specify a different reporter than the CLI. So this is HTML extra is a type of reporter. So I can hit enter, and then oh, I am in the wrong directory, I think. Can everyone see this okay in the terminal?
Yep.
Okay.
Tell me again about that HTML extra.
I sure I can in one. Let's get this thing to run. It's generating a report. There's like 10 different kinds of reports you can make. And great, so this is run. Now where this comes out, I'm gonna ls, it makes a Newman, you can specify where you want these reports to go or git ignore them, whatever. But so if I ls Newman, you can see these Postman Echo files. I'm just gonna open this. That didn't work.
Whoops.
Yeah. Well, here's where to go? Here's this report with this HTML extra, just a type of report you can run. So it ran one iteration. It did 90 assertions, 9 failed tests, 0 total skip tests. You know, it's just a nice report that if you're doing your CI and CD, it can sum it all up. Now, also, if you don't use HTML extra, if you just do like -r is how you specify the type report. If you just do HTML, this is the example I run on that one of the things I work just to show you. It's just a different. You can format your reports any way you want. You can even write your own, but obviously that's a lot of time. Most people need to write their own, but just I was trying to show there's different ways to get your reports. And if we do the same call and I just take off -r is how you specify the kind of report. This will actually just print it all out in the terminal, and it's very faint because just the coloring of my thing on the white background. But you can see it's just printing it all out to the terminal, and you can do that with -r CLI. So there's what I was just showing you. There's 80 ways to see how to print out your outputs, and in probably the best place to go. In here, here's like the help docs, the command line integration with Newman. You know, here's all the different, there's 20 different options of things to change or how many times you want to iterate or like use a data file if you're testing large amounts of data. You know, here's all the options. I just figured people could look that up, you know, where they want. And this is all under the, Postman has a learning center. So here's all their docs are fairly good in videos. That's what that was in. Let's go back to my, oh yeah, so that was, so we were on, here's running with Newman. Now to go from, because I just wanted to show you when it worked in case I messed this up live and not, you know, kill a half an hour. When you're in here, let's say I wanna export this collection. So what you do is you click on it on the little 3 dots, and you can do export right here. And it basically says, you just pick the collection 2.1, the latest, export it. And then it asks, okay, where do you want to have this file exported to? So here I'll take this, and this is this folder I have for this talk. I'll save it. And now I can go over here and list, and we can see test GraphQL file. So I'll do Newman run that file, and then I'm literally running those tests that I just exported. And in this command line, this is more annoying to use when you're developing, but this is what you'd export and run in Jenkins or Circle CI or all those ones, or Travis, you know. And then if you want to export an environment file, you go up here to your environment settings thing, and here's where you can go, this arrow right here, if you want to download it. But again, it asks, okay, here's this environment.json. I can save it. And then here we can see there's that file. And if you want to specify an environment file, it should be -e. Those tests they don't actually use it, but there we go. We can run it. And that's how you'd specify your environment file. Because you might want a different one for your staging. Is that making sense to everyone? Pretty easy, but it's these weird things. It's super easy once you've seen it, but they don't always, it's not that obvious in the thing. And
you've actually given me a lot to think about. Until I play around with all of it, it won't settle in.
Oh, sure. Well, yeah, that's what I was trying to, but you're obviously very experienced. So that's what I was trying to do, you know, this short talk. Here's what you can do with it. And it might be different with every project. You know, I was just showing you the different options you have or ways to use it.
Yeah, good stuff.
And Newman, in the command line, if you're not familiar with Node, like usually -h is help. Let's see. Come on, give us some. Yeah, here's some simple, that's not a lot of information, but you get the idea. What else? Let's go back to my slideshow.
Honestly, I'm telling you tonight, I'm going to be spending 2 or 3 hours playing around with this.
Oh yeah, it's super. If you do a lot of APIs, okay, so these are reminders to my screen shares. So now a few things. I won't go through all this, and maybe, you know, using it in CI/CD is very handy, but you got to be set up with like S3 buckets or have some servers. But one thing to do is usually if you're using continuous integration anyways, like remember that these files are exported from Postman, but like say I write a bunch of code and I change my API, and then I'm in here and even in here, if I change my, you know, you change your API and it's going to output something else. Let's say it returns different keys and you write your test. You got to remember that changing it here doesn't change these files here. You have to do an export and you have to get committed to get those changes into your, because otherwise your API may change and your tests go like this. So there's different ways to do it, but that's what I recommend that we've always done. Even though you can push all this stuff up to Postman's thing and do it, or an S3 bucket, if you run it with it as it goes and check it in, then it should all be in sync. Otherwise, maybe your tests are at version 3 and your API is at version 4 and nothing's actually wrong. So that's what I recommend. And usually I just have a Postman folder in whatever repo. I think I have one up here actually.
So Lee, would you be using the Postman testing in place of, say, another testing suite, or are you using this alongside an existing test suite?
You mean like super test or unit tests?
Yeah, something like that.
Well, sure. So this is actual integration. This will test like all the way through to your database. So this is what we call an, I think you don't need different integration tests. There are other ways. I forget the names, like Insomnia is one, but this is a really good one for your integration tests. But in parallel, you could run your unit tests on your API code, because those don't actually, they just test your one, in Node, what I use the most, it's just one like controller file or one service file. That's your unit test. So, you know, unit testing and then your integration tests, or some people call them application tests, but this actually does the API call. It actually executes your code through all your layers, through all your database, as opposed to a unit test just does your file. So they can go hand in hand, but I don't think you'd need 2 different integration tests. But you know, if you're doing an Angular app that runs on an API, this is still just your API. You still might want your Cypress test or your unit test on your Angular code, but to test your actual API, this will be that. And so I don't think this project, I don't have up with thing, but you can just have a folder in your thing and it's Postman or whatever you want to call it, have your collections in there. And then at least on Node projects, I usually do a script in here, like there's start, but you can do you know, a Newman script or, you know, Newman staging, Newman local or whatever. So still you can just pull your tests. You say, so you check in code, give it to someone else. They can just run one quick thing You don't have to type in like the environment file and all that stuff all the time. I mean, you can take, you can take this like, this kind of line, right, in your scripts. You can do comma, like Newman. And then just like that. And then that's a lot of crap to remember, but as long as everyone exports on the same name and everything, you can push this to Git and then have someone run it. And so this would be a node, but if you're using PHP or Java or some other language, I'm sure you can do some bash scripting we've had to do. But you know, you don't need to type all that stuff out. You know, and you could have dash your reporter, whatever reporter you want. And maybe you have different reporters for locally or in Jenkins. Yeah, so let's not mess that up. Oops. Okay, and where was I in my talk for, oh yeah, so in continuous integration, yeah, they don't auto run. Another thing too is if you're like if you push code to Jenkins or Circle and it runs it and starts it, you have to remember that might take 30 seconds, or some places I've worked, it might take 10 minutes for the actual server to compile and build to run these. So if you're doing it Jenkins, you need to have steps to say, wait till step 1 is complete. And besides build it, like if it's a Java backend, you got to build the Java and then start it. And however you make sure that the test don't run until after that, because it can be easy in some of these things where it just starts and does the test, but the thing's not done building. So however you check, make sure your thing's done or whatever deployed on that. And you know, maybe there's secrets or keys or some changing dynamic URL. You might need to just enter that. You can change environment parameters on the command line too. Maybe you need to change that, just your port. You know, maybe the ports on all your AWS or Jenkins change all the time. You might just need to like enter that somehow. You can choose your report type, but you usually do command line, the output and plus an HTML port, so that if you go look in your logs and you can just read the logs. And then you can do a post. Once all the tests have run, you can have it post to Slack using hooks or whatever. Am I missing anything? Okay, got those. And then monitoring, by that I mean, say you have like your live site up and you want to run every hour and check and make sure your APIs aren't down. Like maybe there's a database error, but you can test all that. You can do the same thing. You can get your code somewhere and you can do that Newman run on, we always used EC2 instances, but you can run it locally and you can, I forget, there's a thing you can do. It's like screen or something in the bash. I always got to look it up, but because I use it twice a year and I just set it and run. You can say every like, you know, 60 minutes, run this script and do it. And then as long if you have it built in and it reports to Slack, it sends it there. I've done this on AWS instances and Heroku. But one thing you make sure you want to do too is that if you have continuous integration and you push code and it deploys it, you want to make sure that Jenkins also pushes those new set of tests to whatever box you're having automated run these every hour. You don't want to have to manually go in and update if you're doing continuous integration and developing fast, but if something's just there and existing and not changing, you could just upload it. But those are some things to keep in mind. Oh, cool. So in the online services, that's where we get into Postman. I believe I'm logged in. Great. Yeah, so here, this was a company I set up a bunch of stuff for, but Berserk.io is like my own thing to demo all these along, and I sign in. And so you can also take, if you've written these tests in docs, you can also publish them and push them up. Like here's a workspace, and it's pretty clever. Like if you change things in Postman here, like for this refinery one, and I have it synced, it does actually update this. It updates these almost instantaneously. It keeps them in sync. which can be confusing. And this, some people use this. I haven't used this a lot, but it's a feature that's there. It's nice. You can do it, and you can, anything you can do in your Postman app, you can have it up here in their whole cloud system. Wow, it's even got my history. I don't use this too much. It's there. It depends. Most people want to keep their APIs and all these things just in their own private code base. You can have mock servers, but that, you could use a mock server, for example, if you want to separate your Angular app and not have to worry about changes in the API. You can set up test things while people are developing the API. You can do integrations. These will be things like Dropbox or GitLab. You know, have it get back up all your collections to your GitLab projects. You know, here's, oh yeah, there's a Slack one somewhere. Have your Postman information posted directly to your Slack team. I think for some of these, you have to buy a paid Postman online thing. Yeah. So again, another, that's a huge thing, but they're there, and to some places that might be good. Now another neat thing is, if you see this, say we write a bunch of stuff and it's a public thing, maybe it's Twitter or whatever, or you're working on some COVID public API, you want to share it. Making docs can be a pain in the butt, but you can literally publish your docs. And this is how I got that Postman Echo. You see there's this button, Run in Postman. Let's go to my Postman, and I'm actually going to delete, I'm going to get rid of this Postman Echo thing. So that's entirely gone. So you can publish, and you can hit this button, and I can open it here. And it should any second. Yeah, here's that whole file and everything and all the tests imported, ready to go and run. And if I want to check an API quick, I can go run this as a collection and hit all hundreds or whatever, how many ever you have. Oh, I see we have a Rafna. You've joined us later. Thanks. Apologies. I messed up sending my link out. That was my bad. I'm sorry if you didn't get it. Here we can run this and run all these tests all at once and check an API. It's really good for public APIs like this. Excuse me. And you can run all that right away out of there super quick. I just checked 90 endpoints within a minute of getting, of trying to learn, you know, all the time, whether, even if you're working somewhere private like DaVita or Aetna, you're using third-party APIs for some things. If people have these, it can make it really easy to use. Not, a lot of people don't, but that's a very handy feature, I think. And then let's see, what else am I talking? But yeah, here I had just where to go next. These links all work. Here's the link to all the details of the Postman API. If you want to go to their very detailed documentation, you can just go and set it up and play with it. And then if you do want to integrate with, like, Slack's a good example, like webhooks, or if you want to run these and set up a hook to send these reports to. This is an example. I think you need a basic paid account with Slack. Any second now. Zoom slows down my hand, but here's the thing. You can create your own Slack webhook and have this stuff come in with, even with icons and all sorts of options. So you generally set that up.
Nice.
Oops, sorry, go ahead.
That's a nice.
Yeah, you can do tons of things with Slack webhooks, but this is one example that probably I've used the most and got you know, good results out of it. So those are that. Hang on, I see, did Sylvia just send a message? Ooh. Sylvia, did you have a...
I sent it on LinkedIn.
Oh yeah. Did you want to post my slides, or you can post whatever you want, or what did you want to post?
I took a picture earlier and I wanted to post, yeah. But I sent it first to you so you can check.
Oh, great. I'll look at it after we're done here. How about that? But that, or
Okay.
did you want to do it like live, like right now?
No. But of course, I will ask you.
For sure.
It's your thing.
I'll check it after that. But so there's how you do that. But you can do this sort of thing with HipChat, with whatever, or just the point is you can run the test and you can do stuff with it afterwards. It might it's somewhere in here, debugging, sharing. It's somewhere in here it's like a post run hook it's like an on exit hook. Again, that all depends on your system. You can play with that. And then, oh yeah, and that was everything I had. This is also just some about the stuff I do, if anyone needs any help. And here's stuff for me on LinkedIn and Facebook and my website, and me on LinkedIn. But yeah, does anyone have any questions or anything, or that was all I had to go through?